In 2018, scientists sequencing DNA from a 90,000-year-old bone fragment made a discovery that would have been considered impossible just decades earlier. The bone belonged to a teenage girl whose mother was a Neanderthal and whose father was a Denisovan, two entirely different species of human. She was living proof that when our ancestors met other kinds of humans, they didn't always fight or flee. Sometimes they fell in love, or at least they mated. This girl, known to science as Denisova 11 or Denny, wasn't supposed to exist. Different species aren't supposed to produce healthy offspring together. Yet here she was, a first-generation hybrid who lived and breathed and walked the earth when mammoths still roamed Siberia. She was part of a pattern that would shape the future of humanity. Every person whose ancestors left Africa is carrying the genetic legacy of these ancient unions. You're not pure Homo sapiens. You're a mixture, a blend of different human species that met and mingled and passed their genes down through thousands of generations. The story begins in a clean room at the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany. Svante Pääbo and his team had spent years extracting DNA from Neanderthal bones found in Vindija Cave, Croatia. The bones were 40,000 years old, their DNA degraded into fragments, shorter than a sentence in a book. What they found rewrote human history. The first complete Neanderthal genome revealed something nobody expected. Modern humans outside Africa interbred with Neanderthals when they met. The evidence was undeniable, matching DNA sequences, shared genetic markers, inheritance patterns that could only mean one thing. Sometime around 50,000 years ago, your ancestors had children with another human species. Europeans and Asians carry between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA. East Asians actually have slightly more than Europeans, suggesting multiple waves of interbreeding as humans spread across the globe. Then came the finger bone. In 2008, Russian archaeologists working in Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains found a tiny fragment of bone, just a child's pinky finger, so small it could have been overlooked entirely. When Pääbo's team sequenced its DNA, they discovered something extraordinary. They called them Denisovans, after the cave. And when researchers checked modern populations for Denisovan DNA, they found it. Not in Europeans or most Asians, but in people from Papua New Guinea, Aboriginal Australians, and other Melanesian populations. 4 to 6% of their genome came from these mysterious humans we know only from a handful of bones. Homo sapiens, the last human standing, wasn't pure. We were hybrids, the result of ancient meetings between different human species who recognized something familiar enough in each other to mate and produce fertile offspring. But the revelations didn't stop there. As sequencing technology improved, scientists began finding traces of other ghost populations. African genomes showed signs of admixture with unknown archaic humans who had never been identified. The Denisovan genome itself contained DNA from an even older mystery species, possibly Homo erectus or something else. To understand what this means, we need to go back 50,000 years. The world was colder then, locked in the grip of the last ice age. Sea levels were lower. Britain was connected to Europe. You could walk from Siberia to Alaska, and humans weren't alone. In Europe and Western Asia, Neanderthals had thrived for over 300,000 years. They weren't the hunched, dim-witted brutes of popular imagination. Archaeological evidence paints a very different picture. Neanderthals had brains as large as ours, sometimes larger. They made sophisticated tools using the Levallois technique, which requires planning multiple steps ahead. They controlled fire, built shelters, and made clothes from animal hides. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, archaeologists found a Neanderthal skeleton surrounded by pollen from flowers. Whether this represents a deliberate burial with flowers or natural accumulation is debated. But the careful placement of bodies at multiple Neanderthal sites suggests they cared for their dead. In Spain, uranium series dating revealed cave paintings over 64,000 years old, hand stencils, geometric shapes, red ochre pigments. This was before modern humans reached Europe. Neanderthals made art. They even made jewelry. Sites in France and Spain have yielded eagle talon pendants, perforated shells, and carved bone ornaments. They were people, with symbolic thought and aesthetic sense. At Abric Romani in Spain, Neanderthals built sleeping areas with grass beds that they apparently kept clean by burning them periodically. They used toothpicks made from bone. They processed plant foods, including cooking starchy tubers. Analysis of dental calculus has revealed they used medicinal plants, including chamomile and yarrow. One individual from El Cedrón cave in Spain had taken a primitive form of aspirin, eating poplar bark that contained salicylic acid, while suffering from a dental abscess. Meanwhile, in Asia, the Denisovans occupied a vast territory we're only beginning to understand. That single cave in Siberia can't represent their entire range, because their DNA shows up in populations from Tibet to New Guinea. A Denisovan jawbone found in Baishia Karst Cave on the Tibetan Plateau dates to at least 160,000 years ago. They lived at altitude, in environments that would challenge even modern humans without genetic adaptations. The mystery deepens when we consider their DNA. Denisovans split from Neanderthals perhaps 400,000 years ago, yet they survived in Asia until at least 30,000 years ago, based on genetic dating. During those hundreds of thousands of years, they adapted to environments ranging from Siberian cold to tropical islands. Each environment would have demanded different survival strategies, different innovations. In island Southeast Asia, other human species persisted. Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbits of Flores, stood just over 3 feet tall with brains the size of chimpanzees, yet they made stone tools and hunted elephants. On Luzon in the Philippines, another small-bodied species, Homo luzonensis, has recently been discovered. The genetic evidence tells us interbreeding happened, but the fossil record gives us glimpses of the actual individuals involved. Take Oase 1, a jawbone found in Peștera cu Oase cave in Romania, when scientists sequenced his DNA in 2015. This man, who lived 40,000 years ago, had between 6 and 9% Neanderthal ancestry. That's far higher than any living person. But what made headlines is the length of his Neanderthal DNA segments indicated he had a Neanderthal ancestor just 4 to 6 generations back. His great-great-great-grandmother might have been a Neanderthal. Then there's Denisova 11, better known as Denny. In 2018, scientists announced that this bone fragment from Denisova Cave belonged to a girl who lived 90,000 years ago. Her mother was a Neanderthal. Her father was a Denisovan. She was a first-generation hybrid, living proof that these groups formed relationships intimate enough to produce children. The genetics tell us this wasn't common. Models suggest perhaps one successful interbreeding event every 50 to 100 generations. But when it happened, it mattered. The children of these unions carried both lineages forward. The main pulse of Neanderthal admixture happened over roughly 7,000 years, between 50,500 and 43,500 years ago. The location was probably the Middle East, perhaps the Levant or Zagros Mountains region, where Africa, Europe, and Asia meet. This was the crossroads where expanding modern humans first encountered their Eurasian cousins in significant numbers. The genetic patterns tell a story of complexity. All non-African populations share the same basic Neanderthal heritage from this period, suggesting a small founding population that interbred with Neanderthals and then expanded across the globe. But East Asians picked up additional Neanderthal DNA later, possibly in Central Asia. Some populations show evidence of even later contacts. Most of these meetings probably occurred at the edges of territories, where small bands encountered each other. The genetics hint at patterns. Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA, which passes only through mothers, doesn't appear in modern humans. Neither does the Neanderthal Y chromosome, which passes through fathers. This suggests most successful pairings involved Neanderthal males and sapiens females, though the picture is complex and still debated. We can only speculate about the nature of these encounters. Were they peaceful meetings at shared hunting grounds? Raids where women were taken? Individuals leaving one group to join another? The bones don't tell us, but they do tell us that when these different humans met, they sometimes saw something familiar enough to bridge the species divide. Consider the practicalities. These groups would have been small, perhaps 25 to 30 individuals. Meeting another band would have been rare but significant. They might have had different technologies to trade, different knowledge of local resources, and crucially, potential mates outside the limited options of their own group. For young adults in small bands where everyone was related, an outsider might have been attractive, regardless of their slightly different appearance. The most dramatic example comes from Tibet. The Tibetan Plateau sits over 4,000 meters above sea level. The air contains 40% less oxygen than at sea level. Most humans who move to such altitudes develop thick blood as their bodies produce extra red blood cells to capture more oxygen. This helps short-term but causes problems. Increased risk of stroke, heart disease, and complications in pregnancy. Tibetans don't have this problem. Their blood remains thin. their hemoglobin levels stay low. They've adapted to altitude in a completely different way, and for decades, scientists couldn't understand how they evolved this ability so quickly. The Tibetan Plateau was only populated about 25,000 years ago. That's not enough time for such complex adaptations to evolve from scratch. The answer came when researchers sequenced the EPS1 gene in Tibetans. This gene regulates the body's response to low oxygen. The Tibetan version is radically different from other modern humans. It's so different that scientists couldn't find its origin in any living population until they checked the Denisovan genome. There it was, the exact same variant. Tibetans hadn't evolved their superpower independently. They inherited it. Somewhere in Asia, as modern humans spread toward Tibet, they encountered Denisovans, who had already adapted to high altitudes. Through interbreeding, they acquired a genetic solution that had been refined over hundreds of thousands of years. This is evolution on fast forward. Instead of waiting for random mutations and thousands of generations of selection, modern humans picked up pre-tested adaptations. It's upgrading your software by copying code that already works. Neanderthal genes gave us enhanced immunity. 3 toll-like receptor genes, TLR1, TLR6, and TLR10, help detect and respond to pathogens. In modern Europeans and Asians, these genes show unusually high Neanderthal ancestry. When our ancestors entered new environments full of unfamiliar diseases, Neanderthal immune genes provided immediate protection. But it goes deeper than individual genes. Neanderthals contributed entire biological systems. They gave us variants affecting keratin production, the protein in skin, hair, and nails. In the cold, low UV environment of Ice Age Europe, these variants likely helped by making skin more protective and possibly affecting hair thickness. Today, these same variants influence whether you have straight or curly hair, how quickly your skin tans, and your risk of certain skin conditions. In the Arctic, Inuit populations carry Denisovan variants that affect fat metabolism. These genes help generate heat from brown fat tissue, crucial for surviving extreme cold. Again, modern humans didn't evolve this themselves. They inherited it from people already adapted to harsh environments. The immune benefits extended beyond individual genes to entire networks. Neanderthal DNA is enriched in genes affecting the innate immune system, the body's first line of defense against pathogens. But it's nearly absent from genes affecting the adaptive immune system, which provides long-term immunity through antibodies. This pattern suggests certain Neanderthal immune strategies were compatible with ours, while others weren't. There's a catch. Genes that helped our ancestors survive can cause problems today. Take blood clotting. Several Neanderthal variants make blood coagulate faster. In the Paleolithic, this was life-saving. Faster clotting meant wounds sealed quickly. Women were less likely to bleed to death in childbirth. In a world without hospitals, these genes saved lives. Today, they increase stroke risk. In our world of processed food and sedentary lifestyles, blood that clots too readily becomes dangerous. What evolution selected for 40,000 years ago works against us now. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed another hidden legacy. In 2020, researchers discovered that a cluster of genes on chromosome 3 dramatically increased the risk of severe COVID-19. This genetic variant, carried by about 16% of Europeans and 50% of South Asians, makes carriers more likely to need mechanical ventilation if infected. This entire gene cluster came from Neanderthals. A genetic gift from 60,000 years ago was suddenly killing people in intensive care units worldwide. Yet the story isn't simply negative. Other Neanderthal genes actually protect against severe COVID-19. Variants in the OAS gene family, which help cells detect and respond to RNA viruses, reduce risk of severe disease by about 20%. These genes also came from Neanderthals, inherited in the same ancient meetings. This is the reality of our hybrid genome. We carry both advantages and vulnerabilities from our extinct cousins. Genes that affect skin and hair helped our ancestors adapt to less sunny northern climates, but may increase skin cancer risk today. Neanderthal variants influence everything from mood disorders to nicotine addiction, though the effects are usually small and complex. The metabolic legacy is equally complex. Several Neanderthal variants affect how we process fats and sugars. In the resource-scarce Ice Age, efficient metabolism was crucial. Genes that helped store every available calorie were advantageous. Today, those same genes contribute to obesity and type 2 diabetes in our calorie-rich environment. Even our brains carry the marks of ancient admixture. Subtle differences in skull shape correlate with Neanderthal ancestry. Brain imaging studies have found that people with certain Neanderthal variants show slight differences in brain structure. Nothing dramatic, all within normal human variation, but measurable nonetheless. These variants may influence everything from sleep patterns to pain sensitivity. This raises a question. If Neanderthals were our equals in intelligence, if they made art and jewelry and sophisticated tools, if we could interbreed with them successfully, why are we here and they're not? Population dynamics likely played a crucial role. Genetic evidence suggests Neanderthals lived in small, isolated groups. Their genetic diversity was low, with signs of inbreeding in some populations. When groups are small, harmful mutations accumulate. Random events can wipe out entire lineages. Modern humans, spreading from Africa, probably came in larger numbers. We had broader social networks, evidenced by trade goods found hundreds of miles from their sources. Shells from the Mediterranean appear in sites in continental Europe. Obsidian from specific volcanoes traveled along established routes. These networks meant information, innovations, and genes could spread quickly across vast distances. Modern humans evolved in Africa alongside a rich variety of pathogens. We carried immunities Neanderthals lacked. Contact between populations often means disease transfer. What was mild for us might have been devastating for them. Climate played a role too. The period from 50,000 to 40,000 years ago saw wild temperature swings. Forests became grasslands. Grasslands became tundra. For species already on the edge, already struggling with small populations, these changes might have been too much. But perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that we simply absorbed them. As modern human populations grew and Neanderthal populations shrank, interbreeding might have slowly diluted Neanderthal identity until it disappeared. They didn't go extinct so much as merge into us, leaving only traces in our DNA. The archaeological record from the crucial period of overlap shows something interesting. Between 45,000 and 40,000 years ago, we see technological convergence. The Châtel-Perronian industry in France and Spain shows Neanderthals making jewelry and bone tools similar to those of modern humans. Were they learning from us? Were we learning from them? The lines blur. Some of the last Neanderthal sites show signs of stress. At El Cedrón Cave in Spain, cut marks on 49,000-year-old Neanderthal bones suggest cannibalism, possibly driven by starvation. At other late sites, Neanderthal groups appear smaller, more isolated. The end wasn't sudden. It was a long fade, population by population, until none remained as distinct peoples. The last known Neanderthal sites date to about 40,000 years ago in Gibraltar. The last Denisovan remains we've found are similarly ancient, though genetic evidence suggests some populations might have persisted longer in Southeast Asia. By 30,000 years ago, we were alone, the last human standing. Except we weren't really alone. We carried them with us. Today, when someone gets a genetic ancestry test, they might see a small percentage labeled Neanderthal DNA. It's become a curiosity, a conversation starter, but it represents something profound. You are literally part Neanderthal, part Denisovan, part populations we haven't even discovered yet. Collectively, modern humans carry about 20% of the Neanderthal genome, scattered across billions of people. Different individuals carry different pieces. In a sense, the Neanderthal genome still exists. It's just distributed among us. The genes you inherited from extinct humans are functioning right now. They're making proteins, fighting pathogens, affecting your metabolism. When you travel to high altitude and adjust better or worse than others, ghost populations might be responsible. We think of evolution as something that happened long ago, but we're living proof it never stopped. We're not the end product of evolution, but a moment in an ongoing process. A moment shaped by meetings that happened when the world was colder and humans weren't alone. The Neanderthals are gone. The Denisovans are gone. But in the most literal sense, they live on in us. We are their descendants as much as we are descendants of the African populations that gave rise to our species. We are hybrids, carrying forward the legacy of multiple human experiments in survival. Every human alive today is a testament to those ancient meetings, to the moments when different kinds of humans looked across the species divide and recognized something familiar, something human, something worth preserving. We are all ghosts, carrying other ghosts within us, and that might be the most human thing about us.